Welcome back to Go Gaddis Real Estate Radio right here on AM 920 The Answer. I'm Cleve Gaddis, host of this show. I'm also a full-time real estate agent, real estate broker here in Atlanta, Georgia. My team, Modern Traditions Realty Group, sells properties for sellers all over Metro Atlanta, north, south, east, and west. We also represent buyers. We represent investors, landlords. You name it, we can do it. And I'll tell you, if you want to connect with us, it's easy. Go to gogaddisradio.com. You can ask any question you want. And man, let me tell you, do I get some doozies. And I don't mean doozies in a disrespectful way. I mean get some doozies. I had one yesterday, and somebody was asking me if eminent domain could be used to change the zoning of a property inside a homeowners association to allow for a certain type of use. Now, my head hurt when I got that question, and it hurt mostly because I have no idea what the answer is. But I'm fascinated by all of the different thoughts and the needs and the feelings that all of the listeners have going on, and I love working with you on your particular issues, your particular questions. I can answer questions on the air or off the air. That's totally up to you. So let's start quickly. Contingencies are only a part of the story, as we discussed in the last segment. The truth is most real estate deals are lost, and in today's world, the percentage of deals that fall through is much higher than it normally is. I would say normally 5% of deals fall through. I would say your average agent in today's market's losing 15 to 20% of his deals, and in some areas where you have newer, less experienced agents, I would say it's 1 in 4 deals that are falling through. And I hate it when a deal falls through. Now, if it's supposed to fall through and it's in the best interest of the buyer or seller, I'm okay with it. But in so many cases, buyers and sellers have plans and they fall through and the train comes off the track. And so in many cases, real estate deals are lost or maybe quietly tilted in some way to someone's favor because of what's hidden deeper in the contract. And if you don't know what to look for, you might think you're agreeing to one thing, but I've seen so many buyers and sellers over the years who learned they were actually agreeing to something very, very different. So a listener asked, what clauses are quietly costing buyers and sellers money every single day? And so let's talk quickly the big picture. Why clauses matter? Well, contracts are designed to protect both parties. In some states, they lean more toward a seller. Some states, they lean more toward a buyer. I would say contracts in the state of Georgia tend to lean a little bit more toward a seller. And it's only because Georgia is a buyer beware state, meaning in the state of Georgia, it is expected that you as a buyer will do all the research you need to do in order to uncover all that you need to know. Sellers should be honest as they disclose things to you. Sometimes they're not, but more of that obligation falls on you as a buyer in Georgia than it does in many states. A single clause, they're designed to protect both parties, but these clauses are also tools for negotiation. A single clause can shift who pays for what, when you can walk away, whether or not you can walk away. Also, maybe things like how much flexibility you have if things go wrong. What happens if the property doesn't appraise? What happens if you inspect the property and you hate everything that you found? What happens if the property is in a different condition the day before closing than it was the day you saw it? There's clauses in the contract that address all of that. Let's talk real quickly about seller side risks first. Number one, a seller can risk unlimited repair obligations. So many agents and buyers write their inspection language so broad, it can make you really kind of the home improvement fund for the buyer. So you have to make sure that whatever you agree to in terms of repairs is very, very specific. Sometimes sellers can get tripped up by flexible closing dates. They sound friendly, but they can really put you in limbo or delay your move if, for example, the buyer has the right to close on this date, or with notice before this date, they can close up to 2 weeks later, whatever it is. And then another thing I would be careful of is concessions, because they can really snowball. One small $3,000 credit can turn into $8,000 or $10,000 in total cost. Or so if you think you're agreeing to give somebody some repair that would cost $3,000, you might as well plan that it would cost you more than that. And then occupancy agreements, which in 2020, 2021, most of 2022, there were no occupancy agreements. There was no sellers for the most part that let someone move in before closing, or maybe a buyer who let a seller stay after closing, although I shouldn't say that. That's totally incorrect now that I think about it. Sellers were allowed to stay in after closing all the time back then because it was such of a seller's market. But a seller has liability. They have insurance issues, things like that. So those are the seller side risks. Let's take a look at the buyer side risks. Sometimes you have to agree. Sellers want you to agree to a as-is purchase without inspection protection. Sometimes it means you take the home as is, even if you later discover major issues. So as a buyer, I would make sure that I understood what are my rights to inspect the property, to ask for modifications to the agreement, to address any issues with the condition, and to be able to walk away if the seller doesn't satisfy my issues. Buyers also should be aware of hidden title exceptions. You own the property, but a lot of other entities have rights to part of the property. Like, for example, your local city or county government probably has a right-of-way that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet across the front of the property. Maybe you have an easement for a gas line or a power line, or in Atlanta we have these underground natural gas pipelines that bring, and gasoline pipelines that bring gas from Houston, Texas and Louisiana all the way to Georgia. And it could be that you own that property, but somebody else has the right to use that little sliver of your property. So I would ask somebody to review with me very specifically what the title exceptions are. And there are clauses in contracts that charge per diem fees. If, for example, you don't close, a builder's contract maybe says you're going to have to pay $200 to $250 a day, and then your lender, as a buyer, is delaying the closing, certainly not on purpose, but $200 or $250 a day adds up to a lot of money. If the delay is not caused specifically by you, it's certainly not palatable to want to pay those. So my tips for you are this. In order to protect yourself, this is what I would do. Number one, and I tell real estate agents all the time, I get questions from real estate agents who call in because I guess they listen to the show, and they'll ask me a question, and I want to put my head down in my hands like I'm depressed, like I'm crying, like how in the world can they even ask this question? Because if you read the contract and read every single word of the purchase agreement, which is what we call a contract in the state of Georgia for real estate, you will know exactly what rights you have. So my suggestion is read every clause out loud with your agent before signing. You should always ask this question when it comes to things that you are going to have to pay, and that question is, what's the most this could cost me? And I mean, for each financial obligation, you have to pay your own closing cost. How much? You have to pay for your inspection. How much? You have to pay for a termite letter. How much? You have to pay whatever it is. You have to pay the title clearing fees, whatever. How much? Make sure you also negotiate caps, put limits on things, and you are very clear on time limits. And it doesn't say the time limit ends the 3rd week of August, the 4th week of August. It's the time limit ends at 5 p.m. on August the 27th, whatever it is. And then put every agreement or change to that agreement in writing. In the state of Georgia, there is no such thing as a verbal agreement regarding real estate. Everything you do must be in writing. So if a seller says something to you and you as a buyer agree to it, insist that your agent get it in writing and let everybody sign it. I can't tell you how many people who I've seen agree to things in a real estate transaction that forget they said it. This is going to sound terrible to say, but I think in some cases the seller or whatever party said they were going to do something that they don't do. I think maybe they knew they weren't going to do it all along. And so if somebody says they're going to agree to do something, you need to make sure you have it in the contract what they're going to do, by what date they're going to do it, and in my opinion, what's going to happen if they do not do it. In other words, if you don't make the $1,000 worth of repairs, then on this date, you have to pay X number of dollars to the other party. It needs to be very, very specific. In many cases, a real estate agent can help you with some of these special stipulations because there is a pre-written special stipulation produced by the Georgia Association of Realtors. But in some cases, when you're talking about things that might be over an agent's head, probably not a bad idea to talk to a lawyer. And real quickly, as an example, a real world story, recently a seller agreed to replace damaged siding on the home without specifying the cost. We were representing the buyer, not the seller. The HOA later required $12,000 worth of siding replacement instead of the $1,500 or $1,800 that the seller thought he was going to have to make. So you have to be very careful to be very specific. And in that case, they had to spend the $12,000 because the HOA wouldn't give them the HOA clearance letter so they could sell the property. And so the takeaway here is real simple. Specificity. That is, it's impossible for me to say on the radio. Be specific. Man, I don't know what my problem is getting tongue-tied. Be specific, because being specific saves you money. It is very important for all of us to remember. So in real estate, just remember, it's not the price you negotiate only. It's also, in my opinion, the rules you agree to live by until that deal closes and after that deal closes. Those rules are written in the contract. And they matter really just as much as the dollar amount, as the closing date, as the seller concessions, as the contingency periods and timelines. All of those clauses matter so very much. And I hate it when a seller learns something after they put the home under contract. I hate it when a buyer learns something after he or she puts a home under contract, learns something that they probably wouldn't have agreed to had they known in the first place. Coming up, you might love the lot, you might love the view, and you might love the price of a home, but there's one thing that could kill, and I mean kill your plans before you even get started, and that's zoning laws. We'll talk about how these invisible rules decide what you can and what you can't do or build on your property. Stick with us. We'll be back.